My experience as a private investor is you got to figure out what's the dominant technology that's going to win in the eyes of 1 billion people. If 98% of the people disagree with you, it's probably a good investment. Like, I could have lined up everybody on Wall Street in 2010. You can go back and you probably had a parade of people, talking heads on television, telling you why Amazon didn't make money, they're never going to make money, blah, blah, blah. And yet, and here we are today. So that was my experience, a happy experience. I knew find the dominant technology and just and put the chip down and wait a decade. I had my father's experience. My father worked for his entire life and retired as a Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force. And then his retirement savings, he can't invest in a savings account. They yield 0. So he goes and he buys some stocks, and he bought like British Petroleum stock. And, so my dad's owning British Petroleum. They have an oil well blow up, and then the President of the United States decides to enter into the fray. The stock gets destroyed, and it's like, why does a non-commissioned officer have to become a stock analyst and bet their life savings on guessing which stock will get destroyed or not get destroyed based on an act of God so he can live happily ever after in his retirement? And we got to the point where, a guy driving a taxi cab has to guess whether or not Facebook will beat Apple, and you're taking risk. And so my view was, there's something wrong. People shouldn't have to be hedge funds, and they shouldn't have to guess whether a stock will beat their quarterly earnings in order to not lose all their money. There's something busted there. And the appeal of Bitcoin is, it's just a savings account in cyberspace run by software. It's like Bitcoin is like a savings account run by software, and it's incorruptible. The software doesn't get to change the rules. You're not guessing whether they'll hit their quarterly earnings. You're just putting your money in that bank in cyberspace, and you're waiting for a decade. And over the course of a decade, after you smooth out all the volatility, it's outperforming the S&P. There's no CEO to give himself stock options. There's no board to issue credit or debt and dilute you. You don't have to worry about your stock triples and the company sells more stock. All you're doing is you're converting what is a weaker form of property into a stronger form of property and waiting for a long period of time. Yeah, I think that if you're going to be in the entire crypto economy, you have to understand the legal and the technical definition of property versus security versus currency. A currency is a legal tender, and you can legally transfer it 1,000 times a year without incurring a tax obligation. I can take $1 million on 6 months ago, hold it for 6 months, give it to you, and there's no accounting event, there's no tax event. Property, I take $1 million of property, if it trades, and I give you $1 million of that property, but the basis has changed, and of course it's going to change. There's a capital gain or a capital loss that has to be accounted for. And so if something's property, you're not going to want to trade it. You're going to want to hold property for a decade. Maybe the ideal holding period for property is forever. Right? You're a wealthy family in New York. Your grandfather bought a city block in New York in 1930. You're holding it in the year 2022. You're going to give it to your grandkids, and property is meant to be levered up. I'm going to mortgage it. I'm going to live off of the borrowings, or I'm going to develop it, or I'm going to sell the air rights over it. I'm going to lien it, right? Or I'm going to rent it, but I'm going to hold it. Currency is something that I'm going to move with high velocity. It's a working capital. So cryptocurrency is a stable coin. Every stable coin is in essence a crypto dollar. And the world wants to move crypto dollars around because they can move them at high velocity and they solve a problem. I can settle every 3 hours, and I can trade 24/7, 365. And so there's a place for high velocity currency. But property solves a different problem. I'm sitting in Argentina, and I want to trade my weak property. Weak property is a business that sells stuff in pesos, and I want to convert it, and it's limited to Argentina. I sell my building, I convert it to Bitcoin. My Bitcoin is valuable and desirable to anybody with money in London, Paris, Beijing, or Moscow. My building in Argentina is valuable only to someone in Argentina. I can rent the building for pesos. I can rent the Bitcoin for euros or dollars. So the cryptocurrency is the stable coin. It's the Tether, it's the Circle, it's whatever the United States endorses. If a bank like Silvergate issues a stable coin, that's going to be cryptocurrency. I'm not a trader, and so my short time horizon is 4 years. During which 5 years, well, I'll take that kind of risk, and my normal time horizon is a decade for a forecast, and the ideal time horizon is forever. It's property. Do I want to own Manhattan? Do I want to own London? Do I want to own gold? Or do I want to own Bitcoin for the next 30 years, right? Having said all that, right, the way Bitcoin trades oftentimes is it trades like with the derivative, the acceleration or the jerk or something of the money supply. So the fast money traders control it in the near term, and they will tend to kind of do the opposite of the long term, which I find interesting. When the Fed said there was no inflation, right, people come on television and say there's no inflation, maybe you don't need Bitcoin because Bitcoin's an inflation hedge, and then the fast money trades against it for a bit, and then another week or 2 weeks go by, and then once you get outside the fast money, the momentum, the more fundamental players come in and they start buying it up, and it accelerates. And I think when the Fed says, well, I guess there is inflation, we've got big inflation, but we recognize it's a problem, the fast money says, oh, well, they recognize it's a problem, so it trades against Bitcoin. The longer term investors come in and they start to drive it the other direction. So you got to decide whether you're fast money. If you're fast money, you're trading on the volatility, and those guys, I guess they know what they're doing, they can figure it out, but I can't figure it out from hour to hour, day to day. My view is, if everybody in the world today universally agrees we have an inflation problem, the question you got to ask yourself is, if the Fed raises short-term rates to 1% or 2%, and they've agreed there's a 7% CPI, and if you can establish a 15 to 20% monetary inflation rate, what's the likelihood that inflation's going away? Well, you've got a lot of digital stable coins. There's 17 or 18 stable coins. The digital currency that's one is the dollar. If the world had its way, we would have $1 to $10 trillion worth of digital dollars circulating. Why aren't they? Well, they need to be endorsed by the banking regulators. If JP Morgan issues a digital dollar, they could issue $1 trillion worth of it. Like that. Because the use case for the digital dollar right now is offshore settlement of crypto trades and people that don't trust their own government and their own banks. If you're in Turkey or Lebanon or Argentina, a short story, I have $1 million in an Argentine bank. I'm worried about the peso. They're pegged one peso to the dollar. On one night, the government sends a fax memo, and they convert everybody's dollars to pesos. The next day, they devalue the peso 10 to 1. The next day, they hand me back 1/10 of the money I had, and that's under a capital control. That's what happens in an environment where you don't trust the bank. So people that are concerned about that, they want to own digital currency. They want to swap their lira or their Lebanese pounds or their Argentine pesos or their bolivars to Tether or to a Circle or whatever stable coin. Corporate treasury usage and retail remittances require a government endorsement. And so I think with digital currency, we're waiting for that government-endorsed digital currency. When El Salvador endorsed